All right. So we're going to go through Med and MNOP and Dextrose here. Dextrose is its own animal. It's one of the most exciting things that we can do as an AEMT. It also requires the most amount of uptick and work, and we're going to kind of walk you through that. I want to again remind you that one of the patterns here, and probably all education, but certainly in EMS education, is that I think that we neglect to realize that knowing this stuff just takes time. I think all of things in life are, your success is the result of first your honesty with yourself, but also simply just your intention plus time. You're like, but I really want to play guitar. Like, okay, well, you haven't played for long, so as much as you've been practicing all day, it's only been 4 days. Or a person that says, well, I've owned a guitar for 20 years. Does that make them good at it? No, because they might have had the time, but not the intention. I mean, we all know this if you've ever seen another human ever in your life, right? So we wish that age was just came with wisdom, right? Sometimes they're very young, wise people, and oftentimes they're very not wise, older people. So don't do this. Don't go home and think, everyone understood that and I didn't, right? Don't go home and think, I don't understand, I just don't get it. Okay, a lot of people won't get it quickly or immediately. It takes time, right? There's a reason why we're going to be, instituting this stuff over and over, and we kind of feed it in piecemeal. But rest assured, just like the drug cards, nobody's going to get quick at med math or concentration development unless you practice it all the time, which is why all of basically the homeworks from here on out will have a series of math problems on them, just to keep you in the wheelhouse of it. Quick reminder, now, as far as your preparation for testable material, basically how I work is I go to the chapter, and this is chapter 13. I knew that. This is chapter 13, which means if it appears in now that you're in AEMTs, now that you are AEMTs, essentially that whole book is yours. Before it was like, ooh, not these pages, not this little blurb, pay attention to only the slides, yada, yada. That whole book is yours, so everything in it is testable. Now, I'll do my best to maximize my time here to point out the most important high-yield stuff, but if I don't, here's something you won't be able to say. Well, you never mentioned that in class. I didn't know you were going to ask me about that. I'm like, did you read the chapter? Because it's in there 4 times. So be careful about that, okay? Part of that is stuff like this. I was looking through the chapter and I was like, oh yeah, it probably is a good idea to refresh on standing orders and protocols. That probably is a good idea, but I wasn't going to have it on the slides originally, which means that there are probably other things that I've neglected to put on there that I will later be like, oh yeah, I hope they read that. So just remember here, essentially, we've got what used to be our medical director up here. We've got a different kind of medical director here. And the big differences are between essentially how this works. Who's working in EMS right now? Okay, where are you working? Metro and. Aww. There's like a support group. There's a separate group chat for just tears. Okay, anyway, the medical director is the person that writes the book. Right? I tell you 324 of aspirin, he tells you 323. You do what he says because he wrote it down in the standing order protocol. When you need a change, you call up, what's a med that we might give somebody that even if they said they were allergic to it, we might be like, I'm calling a doctor. Epi. Is that what you said? Epi? Yeah, absolutely, because it's such a life-saving. There is only one med that we have that has no contraindication to allergy. Which one is that? There's 2. There are 2 meds. Great job. Dextrose is one of them, and there are 3 medications that we... I just found those drug cards on the internet. I didn't even know. Sinokit. Essentially, we'll get into it at a later date, well, Tuesday, but the idea is that if you have cyanide poisoning, you're going to die. You could tell me you're double allergic to a Sinokit, and I'm going to give it to you anyways. It's like saying, I'm actually allergic to hydrofluoric acid, and I'm like, Okay, well, I'm still going to give you this thing that neutralizes it. You know what I mean? So there are only 3 medications that we have without contraindications, and that's one of them. So if you needed help with something in the moment, right? If I'm transporting a person that's allergic to epi, I'm not calling my medical director, I'm calling med control. Who is med control?
You can call the hospital that you're going to.
Wherever you're going, right? The doctor that's about to sign off for that patient. Absolutely. So just be aware of that medical direction is kind of the umbrella term, while medical director is the guy that's writing your standing orders, and the medical control is the fellow that you're calling because you need up-to-date stuff because things are changing in real time. Which means if you were like, why does it say 71 milligrams of aspirin? Who you would call essentially is Ghostbusters. No, you would call the medical director saying, hey, our protocol is weird, something needs to happen there. Now, we have on these intervention cards, and as a reminder, the intervention cards are to be used by you on every practical. Not only do you get points for having them on you, but it can prevent you. Because if I have you working with a silent partner, they can prevent you from making catastrophic failure. The way to do this, okay, and we haven't all clued in on how to play the game. When you're taking a practical and a silent partner is present, what is the thing they will never do?
Harm the patient.
Harm the patient. Which means what should you do with most of your meds in practicals? Have them do it. Right? Because the med checks are important. What I noticed at watching everybody's practicals is some people were doing fantastic med checks and then doing it themselves. So it'd be like, hey, med check. And they're like, yeah, go ahead. List the wrong indications. And they're like, no. And then the guy's like, okay, well, about contraindications? And they're like, there are no contraindications. And your silent partner's like, yes, there are. And they're like, okay, that's weird. What's the dose? Says the wrong dose. And the partner's like, no. And they're like, okay, well, I don't know what he's on or whatever. And then they give it. I'm like, if you'd give it to him, he would refuse. Something's wrong with that, guys. Lou, do your med checks and pay attention. So listen to the med checks, and they're valuable. This falls into one of those categories where I'm like, yeah, but I was even talking to one of the adjuncts. He's like, yeah, but if we let them do med checks, then a bunch of people who would have otherwise failed won't because of it. And I'm like, awesome. We should be utilizing our partners and our resources like that in the field. If you think for 1 second on the way to your 911 call, I'm not Googling everything about your condition on the way, you are wrong. If you think for 1 second that after I drop you off that the doctor is not going to look at your chart and then Google everything about he's going to use a medical Google, but he's going to Google everything about your condition before he walks in. And why shouldn't he, right? Why shouldn't we use the resources available to us? So I recommend that you do that. As a refresher and a reminder on how this is done, put simply, the person with the Burger King hat here in blue, this is the person that is calling it out, right? I'm running the call. We are to do med checks for which medications? All medications, right? Other than oxygen, I guess. We just call it out, hey, I'm going to give nitro or whatever, which we are giving it now, right? Not just assisting. Hey, partner, I need to do a med check. We got to make sure that they hear us. They say, yeah, go ahead. And you say, okay, well, look, I'm going to give 324 milligrams of aspirin by mouth. 324 milligrams of aspirin by mouth because of chest pain. And then he says, sure. Contraindications? You say, well, the contraindications are, what's a contraindication aspirin? Allergy. An allergy to aspirin or what? NSAIDs. Or NSAIDs in general, right? And be careful on your drug card quizzes, that's separate. NSAIDs in general. What's a medication that can be given and works with prostaglandins and fever but isn't an NSAID? Tylenol. Well done. Way ahead of the curve. We're going to be all right. How much ketamine for a kid? Huh? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Okay, and this is actually kind of the point. Today, as I'm mentioning meds off the cuff, if you don't know what I'm asking, look at it on the drug card. It's how I operated my career. A guy would be like, I think it's a uremic condition. I'm like, probably. Or uremia. I'm like, will I look it up? And then I'm like, oh, okay. So when you hear something that you don't know, you should kind of attack it like a starving man on a Christmas hen. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. If I'm being honest, there's a host of AEMT medications that you might be surprised to find we aren't going to spend a lot of time on. Now, if it's in your scope, I don't mind you using it and playing it. I do expect you to know the right answers, but it's like I'm going to ask you on drug card quizzes more about albuterol than I ever will about ketamine. Yes, it's in your scope. We are so early that I don't think it profits you much on the registry, i.e., I don't think they're going to ask you dosing stuff on the registry very often, and I don't think you're going to get a lot of ketamine questions. What I'm trying to do with things like fentanyl, morphine, ketamine, and these kind of heavy hitters is say, hey, know that it's in your scope, have a general idea what it does, and if you get asked a question, the more you know about it, the better. But we're going to be highlighting other things like Epi 1 to 1,000, Epi 1 to 10,000, and these kind of things, because that I'm much more sure they're going to care about you knowing. But rest assured, I had some people come back from, I guess I should say, the registry kicked out practice questions, and one of them was on Zofran, right? I mean, stuff like that were like, just because you can't do it in Georgia doesn't mean that the registry doesn't expect you to know how to do it. In the book, you'll find 10 rights. I don't care that you know all 10. I do care that you know at least 5. I can't promise you the registry won't ask which one of the following isn't a right. But what I can say is before I understood what a med check was, I would always make, and this is the most fundamental things that you have to do. Every time you touch a med, you walk through it in your mind. What's this med? Why am I giving it? Is it the right dose? Is it okay? And then every time you touch a person with that med, whether it's to the IV port, you're about to put it in their hands, you ask yourself again. Now, I teach you how to do a med check, but my entire career, that's what I did. If I touched a med, I thought about it. If I touched a patient with that med, I thought about it again. Make sure you know that you're giving it to the right person, that it's the right med, giving it at the right dose, in the right way, and over the right amount of time or in the right amount of time. You got to know that there are 2 different types of fluids, essentially. We have crystalloid and we have colloid. I can tell you everything I know about colloid solutions real quick. They have larger particles than crystalloid. That's the difference. Colloid has larger particles than crystalloid. I know that one colloid is albumin. It has something to do with blood product. Like, I think it's a protein that your blood uses for something or some reason. As you can tell, I don't know a lot about it, which probably means you don't either. If you said, can you sum up for me what I need to know about colloid solutions in a single sentence, I'd say, sure, which would be a sentence. So maybe 2 sentences, I would say, colloid is larger particles and albumin is one of them. That's all I expect you to know. Far more importantly and far more commonly, I expect you to know what a crystalloid solution is. And these are the 3 most important ones. Admittedly, it tapers off hard. I need you to know everything about normal saline. I need you to know why we give lactated ringers. And I just need you to know what D5W is and that it's crystalloid. That's about it. We're going to start in a conversation of normal saline, which kind of starts our big excitement into the world of IVs. Until you learn a little bit more about it, the amount of times essentially I've watched people use normal saline to a patient's detriment, and I'm like, it would have been better if you'd never done anything at all. If you'd have thrown a little blinky on them and then laid them flat, that would have done much better. Saline comes in all kinds of forms. Well, I should say that it comes in a lot of different packages. We'll see flushes, which are 10 mil syringes pretty commonly. You'll see anywhere from 100 all the way up to 1,000. Now this is 0.9% sodium chloride, which is important to know. I've seen that question on the registry once. Which of the following is normal saline in an isotonic solution? 0.9, 1, all these kind of things. So there's other types of normal saline. There's like 3% and so forth. It's part of the reason we need to check the bag before we administer it to people, though you will almost never see such a thing. Obviously, one of the major benefits is the fact that we can improve people's fluid volume. Give me a show of hands here. What do you suppose I want you to say is the first indicator that you should give a person fluid? Raise your hand for me. Tati, I see you. Lauren, Landon. First indicator. Graham, tell me.
Raise their blood pressure.
Okay, let me phrase it. The first sign I want you to see and think, I should raise, or I should administer fluid. It's not blood pressure. Tati?
Skin condition?
Skin condition is not bad. It's not bad, but it's not first. Rose?
I have a couple things in mind, but
Just confetti it.
I guess like I heard them say back there also dehydration.
Dehydration, shock, how would you know, Graham, that somebody's in shock?
I was gonna say volume loss, like bleeding.
Like as a strong indicator for it? Okay, sure. Aiden, how would I know when someone is in shock?
It's definitively the hypotension.
The hypotension is definitive. If I'm looking at a scale, a timeline, where does hypotension occur in shock? Yeah, I would say late, essentially. Late, it comes before death, but maybe perhaps not. Okay, Landon?
Tachycardia.
My man, tachycardia. The number one sign of dehydration and low fluid volume is tachycardia. There's a skill you can use as a paramedic called cardioversion. Anybody know what cardioversion is? John, what's cardioversion? In a sense, restarting your heart, essentially, cardioversion? Yeah. Just for a hot minute. You're close. Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say close. I mean, that's essentially correct. If your heart is beating too fast because the impulse has lost its mind, you shock it at the right time to reset the heart and get it back on track, right? I was a medic in the field for like 13 years. I've only done that once, or for one patient. I think the reason is I have understood from the beginning the value of early fluid and tachycardia. And the amount of times, I'm going to forget you raised your hand, Henry, so why don't you go ahead?
Is that you do that with a different tool, or is that with the AED?
So an AED is automated. It only does what it wants, which is only defibrillation. When you can move into, in some states, AEMTs do manually defibrillate. But for our intents and purposes, we'll say like a paramedic can now attach pads and control. Little bit of power for pacing, whole bunch for defib, or somewhere in the middle for cardioversion. So they can kind of taper that. I think because I was like, this guy's a heart rate of 104. Let's go ahead and start a line, run a little bit of fluid in there. I think that is one of the major reasons. I think a lot of people cardiovert the wrong rhythm. They see a fast rhythm and think that it's this weird escape thing, and really it's just a fast heart rate from dehydration. So then I'll know quickly because the fluid's not helping. You know, in which case then we'll cardiovert or give adenosine and these kind of things, at least as a medic. Is that kind of what you were? Put very simply, if I throw a 12-liter on Destiny, she's like, I just feel dizzy, and I see her heart rate is 102, I'm like, all right, baby, we're going to get you a line here, running 250 of fluid or whatever. She goes from 102 to 104, I'm like, okay, let's make a new plan. But very often, and in like 50 milliliters, have I seen people's heart rates plummet because they're just a quart low. Our whole nation's dehydrated. Landon, then Alanis?
When it comes to cardioversion, is it more electrical or like the polarity that we're?
I don't understand the question, but it is electrical. You can electrical cardiovert and you can chemically cardiovert as a medic.
We have a patient last week like that, and we did fluid first. We tried like, the
Vagal.
yeah.
Yep.
It didn't work. So we put the pads and we tried chemical first.
Yeah.
Chemical works.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. I know. You're like, I want to ride the lightning. All right. So saline is super good because it's good fluid volume. Here's a term that I'm going to say, and it has to become part of your lexicon. Are you ready? Permissive hypotension. That's all I'll say after I say it. Permissive hypotension. Now you. Now Gummy. Hypotension. Dang it, you're never going to make it as an AEMT, Gummy. That's right. 10 times on the board.
No, because I don't know how to spell it. So
Hypotensive, permissive hypotension, right? We need to give fluid to people, but just the right amount, not too much. Now, admittedly, this is more valuable in trauma situations because we're worried about capillary washout and the trauma triangle. But generally speaking, I don't want to just start a line on somebody and run every liter I have into them, right? We are titrating all of these things to our effect. Now, part of what makes saline is the fact that it's got some salt in it, some NaCl. not much, just a little bit of nickel in there. It tastes super salty, essentially, because of it. But it's important because we have to have the same osmolarity as our blood, or else bad things happen. I don't want to spend a bunch of time talking about this. You have to memorize this. You have to commit this to memory. At least parts of it. In fact, I like this one better. Aiden helped me make this one. Did you know that? Yeah. We have to, this is the core. Everything that we are doing in here is built off this slide. It's the heart of it all. Your job is looking at a triangular shaped human and trying to figure out where on this chart you are. Now you're in luck. There's no metrics here, basically. You are simply trying to figure out what side of the coin you are on. Are you on heads or are you on tails, right? If our person is struggling with respirations, if they're struggling to breathe, their body's going to be fighting the fight, yeah? We get real concerned when the sign is that they're losing the fight or perhaps have lost the fight. The amount of times in my career my partner has said, why are you starting a line? He's not hypotensive. And I'd say, if I wait for that, we're on the other side of the mountain. We're on our way down at that point. We do not wait for that. Which means one of the earliest signs that I want to treat with fluid is what? Tachycardia. Skin condition wasn't a bad answer either. I am a little more careful about putting it up here because the book is like, boom, pallor means you're over here and cyanosis is over here. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know. Be careful. But what I'm sure of, and I'm very intentional here of not writing tachycardia. Why am I being very intentional about not writing tachycardia here, tachypnea here? Sebastian, do you know?
That's like a numerical value on it.
I'm so glad you're here. That's exactly right.
Isn't sepsis, tachycardia technically over 90?
I'm sure. I'm more glad he's here, but I'm also glad that you're here. No, I'm just kidding. Absolutely. In the sepsis criteria, tachycardia is counted at what rate? Above 90, so just like Sebastian said, and I'm sure several other people were thinking, when I put a metric up here, when I say tachycardic, that means that you're thinking, well, at 101, which is a decent thought. But that's not what our job is, right? Our job is walking up to a person, taking a snapshot, putting a point on a graph, and then 2 minutes later, taking another one and saying, how are we doing, up or down? Which means that if I've got this guy right here, if you have an adult patient with a heart rate of 90, are they tachycardic? No. And you shouldn't suspect compensated shock, not if it's only 90. What if I said this person slit their wrist and there's blood all over the floor and their heart rate is 90? They're not tachycardic, but the question becomes, was their heart rate 50 or 60 2 minutes ago? So I'm trying to be very careful about you'll hear me say it time and time again, which unfortunately is recorded, and now my failure is echoed throughout eternity. But I'm trying very hard to say, no, watch. Pay attention. Is their heart rate going up or is it going down? Because it will give you signs that something is wrong long before it becomes tachycardia or hypotension and these kind of things, right? So what I'm saying is that we can be very aggressive in our fluid treatment like we're racing to a red light. That's what I want from you. Who do we do IVs on? Everybody. I think Mr. Denner and I disagree on very few things. This might be one of them. I'm like, hooey, start lines and run them full bore, baby. Now, I'm not saying dump fluid into them, but I'm like, look, in the beginning of your career, what kind of patients do we listen to lung sounds on? All. Why?
Because you have to learn how normal lung sounds. So when you get something that is not normal, like, oh yeah, crappy.
Yeah. Alex, high five Alanis. Yeah, cool. Right? We want to be so familiar with normalcy that we can notice problems and deviancy as it develops, right? And so with the fluid situation, it's the same thing with IVs where I'm like, look, you're at the beginning of your career. Light them up, boys and girls. A year or two in, when it's not so tricky for you, ease back, start asking yourself the question, do they really need it? Do I need to puncture their veins? Do I have to go through this? Not right now. Light them up. Light them up. You got to get good at this. What I don't want is the first time you do an IV in real time is when you need to. I'm not saying do 16 gauges on all patients. I am saying do it sometimes. I got a young man like Jack with veins that are smacking me in the face across the room. Probably give him a 16. I'm going to walk in and the nurse is going to say, why would you do that, you monster? And I'm like, well, it hurt, but they're all pointy pieces of metal. They all hurt. In fact, I've even done it where I put a 20 gauge on one side and an 18 on the other and ask the patient which one was worse. They almost never get it right. It all hurts, right? I walk over there with 24 and jab him in the neck. He's going to be like, ouch. Well, maybe not him. He's made of stone. But, jab him. It hurts. The point is that I don't view it as cruelty, and I take cruelty very serious. Because we have to get good at this stuff. The first time you do a 16 shouldn't be on my son when he's, cut his leg on a bike and now he's hypotensive and you gotta, I'm like, no, you better have done that once or twice before, right? So all I mean to say is this, and we'll get into it a bit later, but 18 gauge is essentially our standard. They're all pointy pieces of metal and they all hurt. If an 18 is tricky for you and you decide this vein's too small, then you downscale to a 20. But if your default is a 20, you downscale to a 22 and we're starting to get into different territory. What I'm trying to say here is honestly, even though I think there's a lot of important stuff to talk about dextrose and Med Admin, if I spent the entire next 2 hours never moving and just repeating and finding different ways to explain this, it would be probably the most important day you had in here. Because again, you hope the NREMT is filled with AEMT skills. It probably won't be. It's going to have some. And I don't think that a person that didn't go through an AEMT class can succeed on an AEMT registry. But it's not going to be all just, IVs and supraglottic airways and stuff. It's going to be chest pain, difficulty breathing. It's going to be all that stuff. It's going to be pathology, physiology, okay? We need to instigate essentially in our mind. I'm trying to frame how I want my patient assessment to develop, but it's pretty sure some version of this is going to occur after ABCs. What's my airway like? What's my breathing like? What's my circulation like? And then where on this chart is my person? Well, they said they're breathing fast and their heart rate is fast, so then I'm over here. Some version of that. It will completely change and dictate the way that you lead that patient assessment. CPAP is an interesting thing, and admittedly, just a holdover I forgot to delete. But worth talking about all the same. CPAP, what do I say, essentially? CPAP, if it's not the reason they're alive, it's the reason they died. CPAP is fantastic, but if you do it to somebody, essentially, that is working too hard already, then you'll force them down the hole. And so every time I do CPAP is like 5 white-hot seconds, right? I grab me a CPAP, I say, hey, a lot of coaching, this is going to help you, brother. Just you take in that air nice and easy. It's going to be some pressure in your chest, but this is all medicine, all medicine. You ready? Okay. I'm like, there we go. You feel it? Feel it getting in there? I'm like, okay, we're going to take that off real quick. If I watch him just crushed under the weight. But those first few seconds of a CPAP, you're just like, and
watching the monitor.
It depends, but mostly I'm watching their work. Yeah, and I mean, it's easier for someone like Landon, who I'm always watching, but if I put him on CPAP for just a moment there, I'm like, that's right, brother, let it work, we're doing the things, and if I see him like, just having a hard time, I'm like, nope, it's gotta go. Ideally, I see him like pulling it in, like really letting it do its magic or whatever, but again, those few white hot seconds there where I'm like, yep, we staying or going. Let me ask a hypothetical here. Hypothetically, if I essentially put, there's a reader. If I put tap water, sterile water into somebody's veins, what happens?
Don't their red blood cells just blow up?
I think we're going to do just fine. It is hypothetical on purpose. We don't want to do that. It's part of the value of normal saline. Ready to go to some science classes, boys? We got to talk a little bit about diffusion principles and active transport, rather. I'm going to do my best to make this stuff pretty simple. Oh, my best friend wished me. He's a robot, my best friend. Essentially, he's much like my wife finds it very difficult to be like, hey, how you feeling? Or whatever. So he just sent me a message saying, hey, no, it's a big day for you. I hope everything goes great. Sent me a little heart emoji too, which is weird because he's married to a woman, so I don't know why. Anyway, it was very sweet. Diffusion. If you remember nothing else essentially about diffusion, remember this. High to low. Say it with me. High to low. That's diffusion in a nutshell. And a lot of things in our body work on diffusion. Who's my A&P nerds? Shannon, you went talk a lot about diffusion. Kendall, maybe? Yeah, okay. Any more? Stuff's cool. Count out, you and me both, girl. We gonna be on the bench together. Okay, so as you can see here, diffusion happened. The world, remember it like philosophically like this. The world is striving for balance in many ways, right? Put simply, if the world sees 3 cubes on one side and only 1 on the other, it's going to try to correct that. That's diffusion at its most fundamental and largely incorrect way of explaining it. Now, we've already talked a bit about diffusion in the past. We've talked about diffusion of gas. There's a little limerick for you, a little rhyme at the end. Why does oxygen go from the alveolus into the capillary? Why does that happen? Don't say diffusion, get smacked. What? Essentially, there is a higher concentration on one side than the other. Anything else? That's the real, yeah, that's a perfect answer. That there was more O2 in the alveolus because we breathed in, and since there was less here because, what happened to the O2 in the blood? Got used up, right? Went to the tissues. What happened to that O2 when it got into the tissues? Metabolized. Can you go farther? Cellular respiration occurred. The O2 added to sugar, or are you just talking to me? Okay, I didn't know if we had okay. O2 added to the sugar to make essentially energy and ATP on a longer citric. Yes, okay, we're gonna do great. But just like Jack said, essentially, because I breathed in more O2 than was there in the blood because it was used up through cellular metabolism, it shifts across. And the reason it shifts across is because of pressure. Because due to a law that we'll get into later, essentially, there are 3 here, so there's more pressure there. There is, let's say, 1 here, there's less pressure, so by the act of diffusion, it moves across. And the same happens in reverse. Why do we take a breath? To get rid of that CO2, which means that not only is chest rise important, what else is important? Chest fall. And if chest fall is not happening, what might be happening, occurring? Retaining CO2. We're going to see a picture like this kind of conceptually over and over. What I'm trying to kind of describe here is like a absurdly big cell, and this is its phospholipid layer. It's in the book. I don't think you need to know that. Huh?
You made it?
Hell yeah, I made it. Look at me. I'm an artiste. Yeah, it's just one. I knew my MS Paint skills would come in handy. I just copied and pasted a bunch of circles. It all worked out. The idea here is when we're talking about diffusion in part, we're talking about low to high concentrations of things, and very often are we discussing it across the wall. But as we get into the other types, this is our image we're going to kind of continuously reference. Now, osmosis is a specific type of diffusion. It is specifically these 2 things, involving a cell membrane and involving water. When I inevitably ask you a question on osmosis, you are looking for the one that says cell membrane and water. Now, the heading is a little confusing here in the sense that I don't mean to say that tonicity is somehow that osmosis is part of tonicity, though I suppose it is. Just don't be confused here. This is my lead into our next topic, which is tonicity. But osmosis is a type of diffusion specifically involving water moving across the cell wall, not a solute. Tonicity is a term, essentially. When we use tonicity, I can only really speak for EMS and probably most things, but when we say the word tonicity, or when we say things like hyper, hypotonic, isotonic, it is all, referential. If I said, you could technically say, hey, is dextrose hypertonic? Is dextrose hypertonic?
Yes.
Hypertonic? It's like like tiger, hyper, right? Or bear maybe? Whatever animal you want to be, I suppose. Hypertonic. The question becomes, or you could reasonably ask, hypertonic to what? Because hypertonic is a reference. That's like me saying, it's like me saying this. What kind of car are you, what's your favorite car actually, let's say, Alex?
What? NSX.
RX-7. I would have also selected that as a fellow car guy. Say it again.
It's RX-7.
RX-7. Is that car faster?
Like, for its time, I guess, yeah.
It's an old car.
Okay. What kind of bike you ride? Say it again. Triumph. Is that faster? Thank you for playing. Right? What I'm saying is saying something is hypertonic, we're saying it than what? It's relative. Now, every time we talk about this in EMS, we're going to be referring in reference to the blood in the blood cells. So when I say dextrose is hypertonic, Kendall, what is dextrose hypertonic in reference to? No, are you listening at all? Yeah, it's blood. Of course you're right. Yeah. Blood. What we're talking about therein is the solute concentration, which can be seen as the solids. If I handed you, I gotta be honest, I don't know how true most of what I'm gonna say is here, but philosophically it has always worked for me, so don't dig into it too hard. I've always viewed solutes simply as solids. Like if you said, hey, hand me a bottle of Zofran. What's the dose for Zofran for an adult? Say, yeah, wow, you said 4? Get after it. 4 milligrams. How much, if you were going to give me Zofran, how much would you give me in a syringe?
4 milligrams.
Yes, but how much would you know to push?
Like, you look at the syringe.
You look at the syringe. Do you see milligrams on the syringe?
Oh, the milliliters per month.
Yes, ma'am. And so if you wanted to give me 4 milligrams, you'd have to give me what? 2 milliliters, right? Now the solute part of that is the milligrams. The solvent part of that is the milliliters. Essentially, that's the volume. What I'm saying here is the solute as a concept is the solids, the particles, if you will, okay? If I make up some Kool-Aid and I have water and sugar and Kool-Aid flavoring, what part of that is the solute?
The Kool-Aid.
The Kool-Aid and
Sugar.
the sugar, right? Water diffuses. We got a special term for water diffusing. What's that called? Osmosis. Now, oxygen and CO2, they're diffusing because of a pressure change, right? Because more molecules of oxygen means more pressure, therefore it diffuses from high to low, yeah? Water is not necessarily diffusing from high to low because of pressure. Water is diffusing because of the solutes that are contained. Meaning, if I had 2 solutes over there on that side of the cell wall and only one here, water would bind to that essentially and say, oh wow, we got to get across there. We are way off balance. Water is going to bind to solutes, largely salt and sugar. And this is why we always say this very important statement. Water follows salt. Now you say it. Water follows
salt.
If I have more salt on this side of the wall, where does the fluid go? To that side, right? I'm not tall enough to point to the one. I'm just in the middle somewhere. If there was more salt on this side, where would the water diffuse? To where, essentially, there is more solutes. Is there a hand in the back? Tati, Alanis? Landon?
Is it trying to achieve balance of the solute on either side of the cellular wall?
Yes is the easiest answer.
Okay.
It's trying to achieve balance. The truth is the polarity of water is essentially attracting it, I believe. And did someone say yeah? That sounds right. We're getting in deep water for me. But it's not like water has a mind of its own. A force is largely driving it, and that oncotic force, essentially, the polarity as it attracts to the salt and stuff. So, but in short, if I've got more solute over here, like sugar or salt, the water goes there. Which is why it's always a little weird for me when I say, like, what, Pam, what's polyuria? That's all right. We can maybe break it down. Poly meaning what? Many, right? Urea meaning urination, sure. Polyuria means
Abnormal frequent.
lots. Yeah. What kind of condition leads to polyuria? High blood sugar. DKA is part of that, maybe, but certainly high blood sugar, because it could be DKA or perhaps HHNK, HHS, or WWJD, or whatever the like whatever. But definitely hyperglycemia. We used in EMT class, essentially we'd say, well, the reason why you're polyuria essentially in DKA is, or in hyperglycemia, is because your body's trying to get rid of all the sugar. No, it's not. It's binding too much.
Make you feel like you have to pee. So you pee.
In large part, it's because with hyperglycemia, we have a ton of solutes in our blood, and the water is going to go where the solutes are. And so in your kidneys, as there's so much sugar there, water is now dumping in that way. So it's easier to remember to say, oh, your body's trying to get rid of all the sugar. I'm like, no, physics are making your body get rid of water because the sugar is a solute and it's pulling water. More sugar, more water. You ready? You with me? Yeah. Oh yeah, I love science. So in this case, we are finding a balance, right, between these solutes in the water and our cell membrane. I drew this one too, by the way. Now, what happens here is I have more solutes on this side, yes? And so water is going to want to do what across the cell wall? Cross for sure. Let's give it a different, diffuse for sure, and a specific type of diffusion. Osmose. No, I don't know. I don't think that's real. It's going to osmose all over. Osmose on the wall, osmose all over the cell wall. From the window all the way to the cell wall. So water is going to diffuse across to balance out the solutes. It does mean there's more water on that side, but it also means that it's binding more. And so see how it's, even though more water went over there, it's still equalized, because essentially those salt and sugar molecules are forming bonds with the water, which is a little farther than we need to go. Now, we know oxygen gets across the cell wall, a very specific cell wall. Which cell wall am I talking about? Yep, and also every other one in our body, right? Now, I mean, I set it up, but because obviously every cell, almost every cell, probably every cell needs oxygen, right? And so it goes across our cellular wall, alveolar wall, and goes through our blood into the decay through diffusion because of pressure. Water will do it too. Why is water doing it? Diffusion, osmosis, binding to the solids as the solutes bind it out. Does that make sense to why the water would go across? Why would the water be going across there? It's chasing the solute, right? Because there's no solutes over here, there's just gas bubbles, right? But it's going to go where that solid is, okay? Now, sugar doesn't cross the cell wall by itself. How does sugar cross? Hit me. Insulin. It's too big. It doesn't diffuse across naturally. It needs help. And so insulin, essentially, is how we get it through the cell wall. You with me, Pam? No? What you worried about? Stop doing that. Taking a breath real quick. You ready? I'll do it with you. Pam, sit up. Take a breath. That's diffusion. See, she knows. That's a third of what I just talked about. What we're talking about are the different ways stuff goes into and out of our cell wall. To put it as simple as possible, they just do it in different ways. Some do it because of pressure. Some need help using insulin. Some are trying to balance out the solids, but it's all just moving across the cell wall. So in this case of sugar, it's not enough to say, oh, I'm hyperglycemic and the pressure is going to increase and it goes across the cell wall. No, it's too big. It can't enter the cell. It needs the key. It needs insulin. Otherwise, it stays where it is. Now, we refer to tonicity. AI did that one. Isn't it cute? Blood has solutes in it. Your erythrocytes have salt and albumin and sugar in them. And so when we refer to tonicity, we are referring to the fact that how does this thing I'm putting into your body compare to all the solutes that are in your blood cells? And so a hypertonic solution must have more solutes than your blood cells. Tap water has no solutes. I should probably be saying sterile water, but then my picture doesn't make any sense. Tap water, essentially, unless you grew up in Flint, Michigan like I did, which we had tons of solutes in ours, tap water is essentially hypotonic. And like Sebastian astutely said, we're going to have a major issue there. Now, water follows what? Salt, which means that if I give you a bunch of water that does not have salt in it, where is that water going?
It's not going anywhere. It's not falling anywhere.
Water will follow wherever the highest solute is. Saline won't, but water will.
You say meter. So is that the sugar they're talking about? Because you said solid.
What's up?
So usually,
I'll get to it.
you were just saying how if you just put like soy water, is that why we wouldn't give it to someone that has pulmonary edema?
We can't give, so why shouldn't I give gasoline to somebody intravenously?
Is there color?
Because it'll kill them. The answer is true as well for sterile water. It'll kill them. The question is why, and that's kind of what we're building to. Why, the question you might be working towards essentially is why do I have to be careful with, I see you, sweetie. Why do I have to be careful with normal saline in pulmonary edema? And it's a similar issue, but we can never give sterile water IV. There are times where we shouldn't give saline.
So, hold me this. It's weird.
Do you know what time we should give sterile water? IV?
Well, I learned completely different than what you just said
Oh.
in my last class.
Oh.
No.
Listen to me, my dear.
No, I will. Okay.
So, talk about that after.
If water doesn't have salt in it, but it follows salt, and we put water on the body, it will go to the blood.
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Follow the salt that is in it.
Yes, ma'am.
That killed.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Please don't do that. Well, unless you're not very good friends, I suppose.
Yeah.
Jack?
What would be the difference in injecting regular water versus drinking regular water?
I'm so glad you asked. It is a big difference between the liver is the shortest answer. Well, the liver is a big part of the answer. If I give you, like, we can give Tylenol, PO, you can eat it, and we can also give it intravenous. Now, it's not the same. We're not giving syrups with sugar IV, but you can give that med in either case, but it changes the power of it. What I mean is this. If I give Rose Narcan intranasally, if all of that goes on her nares is going to go into her bloodstream and bypass the liver just like our IVs do. But anything that sprays in the back of her throat and she just kind of swallows that med goes into her esophagus, her stomach, it gets mixed with acid and broken down, small intestine, and then it's absorbed, it gets pitched out to the liver, it gets processed, and whatever Narcan went essentially in her GI tract is now 1/10th, 100,000th of the dose because her body and her liver processed it. Whereas if I just shot it into her vein, it skips that stage. I'm not sure that I answered your question though. Did I?
Okay, so your liver sorts out how much water you need and how much you don't need?
I don't know what sorts out the water, if I'm being honest. My guess is it's a kidney. But part of the reason why drinking it is different isn't the liver. It's that your body is digesting it and breaking it down before it ever enters your bloodstream, essentially. And to be quite frank, I don't know what happens to it that makes it. I think simply it's just that it's just not entering your bloodstream in the same form is probably the answer.
Is sterile water dangerous to give intravenously?
It is dangerous to give intravenously.
Okay, but since it's sterile, it doesn't have any solutes, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Sterile water is dangerous to give intravenously, and we don't. There are probably some, that's why I asked if you knew something I didn't, essentially, because I'm like, I mean, a lot of our solvents are sterile water. A lot of it's benzyl alcohol. Like, I mean, there's probably reasons why. Like, for example, like D5W has sterile water in it, but it's not hypotonic because it's got dextrose in it now, you know? So there's a lot of different things. But in short, essentially, normal saline is the same tonicity as our blood because of the salt that's in it. If instead it was 9% salt, it would be probably hypertonic because it suddenly now has more than our blood cells. If it had 0% salt, it is hypotonic regarding our blood cells. And so because it has 0.9, it is isotonic, meaning when I give you intravenous fluid, it doesn't start going into or out of your blood cells because it's isotonic. It's the same level of solids or solutes.
So if there's more salt, would it dehydrate you instead?
If there's more,
Salts in the
there is a conversation to be had about interstitial fluid that we're not having today necessarily, but you are right if by simply saying if it had too much, would the water leave the blood cells? Yes, because water will always follow the salt. It's fun. So, if any of this is spinning your head up, what's more important to know is this, that saline is isotonic, which means fluid is not shifting. That tap water is hypotonic. Why? Well, because it has less solutes, less solids. That D50, which is D 50% or dextrose 50%. 50% of what? Well, 50% of its volume is a solute, and that solute is sugar, i.e. dextrose. So D50 means if I've got 2 gallons of D50, 50% of that is sugar. Does it surprise anybody, especially now, that it's D50 is very hypertonic? 50% of it's a solute. That's why when you, anybody ever pushed D50?
No, they fixed it, but like do the rest of the syringe because you're not supposed to push D50.
You can, it's not crazy. But when I push D50, essentially, I push it against a wall. It's like pushing Caro syrup out. 50% of it's sugar. And it's tasty, by the way.
Have you tried it?
Why not? I just said 50% of it's sugar, the rest is sterile water. What's the big deal? You ever have a bowl of cereal? I assure you that's more than 50%. Okay. You're a lot. Water follows the salt. If I give you water that doesn't have any solutes in it, then that water is going to go find the salt that's in your blood. And Sebastian, what's it going to do? Blow up. Not that I care that you know this, but I spent most of my career saying apoptosis. That's cellular destruction. Not technically. Apoptosis is, I think, the cell destructing itself. Lysis is what's happening in a more superficial term. If it's hypertonic, meaning I give you D50, D50 is hypertonic in reference to what? Blood cells for sure, probably a lot of things, honestly. But the blood cells, which means that even though there's salt in the blood and there's no salt in the D50, water's still going to go to where the solute is, which means water, Sam, when I give you D50, does water leave your red blood cells or go into your red blood cells? Hot dang. Is it something he said? I can apologize for Sam. He means well. Here's our situation and why I refer to it this way. Hypothetical situation, tap water, is a hypotonic solution. We should picture, this is AI too, by the way. I said, draw me a picture of a red balloon hooked to an IV at a thing, and it did it great. And then I said, okay, now do it like it popped in high def camera, right?
Did it do? Oh man.
Had me a smooth transition. What? So what I'm telling, this is the image I want stuck in your mind. This is how you solve and crack the code of tonicity. If you can remember that a little red balloon blood cell is hanging off of tap water, it will explode because water is going into it. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Or else.
So the balloon exploded because water went into it.
Yeah, because when you give somebody a hypotonic solution like tap water, water is going to go to where the solutes are. Oh, Mr. Farron, there's no solutes in the red balloon. Shut up. It's going to rush into that red blood cell and blow it up. Meaning if I did essentially the reverse of that, like I hooked, maybe I should have, had like a Hershey's syrup bottle with a thing, then that red blood cell would shrink because it's going to go to where all the sugar is, the water. Jack?
Where do solids go?
Pardon?
If water goes into the cells,
They want to leave. Like I'll ask you, why is sugar like not just going through the cell wall like water is? Well done, Jack. Not only do you know the skill, but you just puppeteer. No, but essentially that's right, because some can diffuse passively, but some need help. So the solutes, essentially, the salt's staying right there. Why? Because it has polarity. It can't just, it's weight, not. Say it again.
I think it's because of the potassium.
I don't know, sweetie. I really don't. I know potassium plays a part and so does sodium is another one. Calcium.
Is solute and solvent
In
the
short,
same thing?
no, ma'am. Solute is solid. Solvent is the liquid.
Oh, okay.
The solute stays there because it can't fit through the wall. It needs something else. In the case of sugar, it needs insulin to go in. We'll talk here in a second about sodium potassium pumps. Great.
With a hypertonic solution, since the cells shrink, does that have any effect on blood pressure typically?
I don't know that it has a direct effect on blood pressure, but what condition do you know that presents with misshapen red blood cells? Sickle cell anemia. So in a sense, if you administer hypertonic solutions to somebody to the extent that it's now systemically affecting their blood, I don't know that it immediately translates to, it's not a volume problem. Blood pressure is not dropping, but now it's what's called crenulation, like the top of a castle or a tower. Their blood cells are crenulating, shrinking, so they can no longer hold as much oxygen. And so they're becoming cyanotic, hypoxic, and then eventually, what are you doing? No? Okay. I'm like, man, that smile lasted a while. Okay. We'll take a break here in just a second. We've talked about the benefits of saline. Graham, what's a benefit of giving somebody saline? What's one reason we'd want to do it, and why is it good for them?
Are we speaking of it containing the same amount of solid as your blood?
I mean, that's important. How would I phrase that in a way that blew my socks off? It's isotonic. Okay. Giving somebody an isotonic solution may benefit them, but the real benefit of saline is just put fundamentally fluid. They need fluid. So we give them fluid. Why we give them saline over sterile water is because it's isotonic. Right? Yeah. The question becomes, like every other medication out there, is it indicated and is it contraindicated?
Can you explain isotonic, what that means again?
It means it's no fluid moves because the solute is equal.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I can sum it up here. We got two bottles right here, 1 and 2, yeah? These are our solids, these are our solutes. Call them salt, call them sugar, whatever you want. This crack right here is the cell wall. Fluid will balance according to diffusion or through diffusion. I'm sorry, I'm creeping up on here. Fluid will seek to balance. Is this imbalanced?
No.
No, because there's one solute on each side. We have isotonic solution.
Because they're balanced.
Because it's relative. Okay, like in this sense, let's say this. No, you're okay, you're doing great. This desk is isotonic because it has the same amount of solutes as this one. I can assure you other people have the same question. So no fluid movement happens. Suddenly I give dextrose, just one molecule of sugar for some reason. I gave it very carefully. Where is fluid gonna go?
To the water.
The fluid is gonna come over
to the
here
to the
because there are two solutes, which means this is hypertonic to that.
Okay.
This is hypotonic
'Cause it has
to
weight.
this, right? Now, if we have a third thing, we've got one solute, two solutes, and two solutes. This is hypertonic to the black one, right? This is isotonic to that one because
Because it has the same.
we on board?
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That
dude.
helped a lot. It just means that it has no solid.
It means it's equal solutes.
Solute. I keep getting them to make sense. Solute.
I'll get through these negatives and then we'll take a break. You can ask your question. Part of the downsides of normal saline is that it's room temperature usually. Why is that a problem? Hypothermia. Okay. The pH is 5.5. Why is that a problem? If they're already acidic, that's a problem. Kendall, what's your blood probably pH? 7 point what 5? Very well, maybe you've always been a little poised, but 7.35, 7.45. Here's how you can kind of get through the water. We all probably know normal end tidal range. Do you know normal end tidal range?
35 to 45.
My girl, 35 to 45. Just put a 7 on the front of that. That's normal blood pH.
Oh, okay. That's a good one.
I mean, it's okay. It only took me like 6 years to put that one together. I was just like, man, you got to remember this and you got to remember that. I don't even think I did come up with it. I think somebody was like, no, dude, it's just like the end title. It's just 7. I'm like, so the temperature is not good. The pH is not good if that's an issue. But the composition is largely fine. Why am I saying the composition is fine? Reference its tonicity. It's isotonic, and that means it's matching the blood's tonicity, specifically the blood cells. The problem is that if we remember the trauma triad, essentially, does a person who, a person who got hit by a car and now lost 2 liters of blood volume, do they need volume replenished? Yes, they do. The problem is the only thing I have available to fix that also pings on every layer of the trauma triangle. What is, and this is why I mean, I'm like, it's like watching the medics go into, or the AEMTs go into medic class. It's just like 6 people staring at upside EKG talking about axis deviation. I'm like, they're not breathing. Please go bag them. You were way better at this when you were in EMT. The same thing happens in AEMT. You're like, all right. I'd probably throw a 18 in there, get some fluid running, da-da-da-da-da. And I'm just like, dude, their sugar's 20. Like, what do you even... Also, they're bleeding to death, and that fluid you're running in there is cooling them down, which is the opposite of what I want. It is making their blood more acidic, which is the opposite of that I want. And the fact that now, because you're not giving blood product and albumin and clotting factors and the like, you're giving just water, essentially. Anytime it goes past a clot, it blows it right out. This is what I was referring to when I said, understand that when we're treating especially trauma patients, and maybe mostly trauma patients, that we are administering this fluid for permissive hypotension. I'm not trying to give, if I shot an arrow through Henry, essentially, and he's bleeding all over the place, and his his MAP is low at 60 or whatever, I'm not just like, boom, send it, squeeze that bag until his blood pressure goes to 120 over 80. No. I need to hit 90 systolic and stop. I need to hit 65 MAP. These are important numbers, 90 systolic and 65 MAP. These are both references to permissive hypotension. Why I wanted even EMTs to know that is that if you're working with an AEMT or a medic and your guy's bleeding all over the place, I need you to have the wherewithal to say, hey boss, you want me to slow this IV down a little bit? He's at 92 over 50. Even when it was outside of your scope, I wanted you to know it because I wanted you watching my back when I'm like bagging, getting up at this end, setting end title or whatever, and you'd be like, hey, we're running this thing wide open. His BP looks pretty all right. I got his MAP at 72. You want to stop that? And I'll be like, thank you. Yes, please. Let's slow it down. Cool. All right, we'll take a quick break.
So when it gets to that, that's when you slow it down?
Yes, ma'am. Now, let's say that for now, we'll say in trauma patients, we care about permissive hypotension. What I don't want you is some guy that's 90 years old sweating his balls off, essentially, and you're just like, oh, he's at 90 blood pressure. We can stop this. I'm like, no, we're not worried about his clot or his pH. He is thirsting to death. So this is very specifically for now in trauma permissive hypotension stuff. We'll take a quick break. Landon, if you remember your question, Alanis. Now the question might become, if saline has so many problems with it, why don't I just give blood products? And a lot of companies are starting to do that. The simple reason is because we ain't got it.
It's complicated.
It is complicated. It is mostly, though, it's just we don't have enough, right?
Yeah. You have to be like enough.
It has to be a specific kind or else you're going to cause them to blow up. You know, and so we got to be very specific about that stuff. On the term of permissive hypotension, what I'm saying is let's say a guy is bleeding to death. When do I want you to administer fluid to that patient?
After you address the bleed.
Address the bleed, a whole cascade of patient assessment stuff. Okay, maybe not necessarily. Right, you're right. What's my general impression?
Take blood pressure.
My gloves on.
Sebastian, I've got a guy that's bleeding to death. When do I want you to give fluid to him?
I don't know.
Sam? I am permitting, I'm not ordinarily, like if Alex right now, he's like, man, Mr. Fearon, I'm dizzy, and I check his blood pressure and it's 96/40, I'm like, dude, drink some water, I'm gonna start an IV and I'm gonna run it in. 90 is too low, right? We need fluid for that fella. He's like, do you think it was because I shot myself with a shotgun and I'm bleeding all over the place? I'm like, oh, I missed the sight and the sound of that somehow, but that is probably why your blood pressure is low, which means now I'm not giving you fluid at 96/40. Why? Oh, where was that? My girl. Because I will permit hypotension when they're bleeding to death. Because there's a threshold there. When I drop below 96 systolic or 65 MAP, you don't have enough volume to prime your pump. You don't have enough preload to move anything. So I give you saline and it goes above 90, but at that point, the acidity, the fact that it doesn't have clots, the fact that it's not blood starts hurting you beyond 90 if you're bleeding. So I will permit you to be hypotensive until you get so low you can't move the fluid around anymore, and that's what permissive hypotension means.
You say 90 systolic and
65 MAP, M-A-P.
So you're saying like you would want them to drop below?
I don't want anybody's blood pressure to drop.
Well, no, I'm in the situation like you're not going to give fluid until this, or you're going
That's
to
correct.
bring their fluid up till they hit this point.
Let's say, we got to be specific here because we're going to enter into a lot of hypotheticals, but let's say that you jumped out of a plane, fell 9,000 feet, and lived, but are now bleeding to death, okay? You're bleeding to death. I walk up and stuff, and I'm going to say, hey, Pam, start a line and just let's get a line going so we can see. As that fluid is just trickling in and doing nothing currently, I'm going to check your blood pressure. If your blood pressure is higher than 90 systolic, I'm going to be like, ooh, pause it. We don't need any fluid. And she's going to be like, but it's 90. And I'm going to say, you idiot. No, I'm not going to say that. But I'm going to say, hey, no, we are permitting hypotension because saline's going to do a lot of bad for us if all saline does for us is volume, and that loses value beyond that point. It is about balance. It's just that if we had blood product on every truck, I would not be teaching half this lecture. I'd be like, give them blood, send up the pressure, who cares, or whatever. The problem is that saline isn't blood, it doesn't have clotting factors, it doesn't have the right pH, and it's often too cold. It's bad for you if you're not just using it for the volume.
So what about like internal bleeding? Like if there's some sort of traumatic thing and
Uh-huh.
like they have bad internal bleeding.
Yep.
Wouldn't the fluid kind of make that worse?
Yes.
So what do you do in that situation?
There's no difference between the external and internal bleeding as far as fluid administration. If a guy's like, oh, my tum-tum hurts, and I'm like, okay, what happened? He said, well, I jumped out the window, I landed on it, and I'm like, just Cullen sign everywhere, retroperitoneal hemorrhaging stuff, and I check his blood pressure and it's 96/40, I am not giving fluid to that guy. He's bleeding to death. Inside or outside, it's not relevant.
But if it drops below that, you're still giving fluid?
Yep.
Wouldn't that just like put more like volume into that
Yes.
cavity?
Yes. So what does he really need?
That hospital?
A surgeon. Well, he don't got one right now, but I can just kind of keep his heart beating, and tragically as his, kidney is bleeding. Okay, I agree, but it's that or death. I mean, God willing, I just go in there and I just fix it myself, but until that day, I'm just going to do what I can do. Yeah.
Are there any long terms, like post hospital, with saline, or does your body just kind of handle it?
Processes it easily. It's just like air in the veins. Mostly it's just like, I'll just bust it up. Okay. Just like when you eat too much sugar, just like when you have too much salt, your body can handle a pretty widely swinging version of that stuff. So it processes it fine. It's why we always call this the drunk vein. So once you get the ability to start IVs, you can always tell who drinks the most because these veins start getting scarred up real bad because you're taking stuff from work, shooting lines in after a night of drinking, running saline in. Trust. You'll see. Did I miss any questions? Okay. Our dose is 20 milliliters per kilogram for both adults and for pediatrics. Asterisks. For neonates, we shrink it down. You'll see a lot of this. Adult and ped kind of the same, but neonates are a little different. When you just popped out of the oven, you got a lot of different physiology, a lot of different anatomy going on. Now, PHTLS, do you remember how the AHA is essentially the governing body for cardiac arrest and all things considered cardiovascular in that regard? PHTLS, pre-hospital traumatic life sugar, I don't remember, I lose track of what it is, but PHTLS is the big dog in trauma. And so this is what I say. Your dose to remember is 20 milliliters per kilogram, but it is okay essentially with adults, especially in traumatic situations, to just send a 250 bolus. Send 250, see how he's doing. Send 250, see how he's doing. Send 250, see how he's doing. Okay?
What is a bolus? Is it just like...
I'm glad you asked. A bolus is a term, essentially. All the meds that we give in here are boluses. We don't do infusions until we become paramedics. A bolus is a very unhelpful, arbitrary description that says a large amount of fluid or medication over a short amount of time. To answer that as succinctly as possible, I would say if you're given a med in less than 10 minutes, we'll call that a bolus. I'm pushing dextrose into you directly, bolus. I'm putting it in a D10 bag and it takes 9 minutes to get into you, bolus. But if you're starting to do a calculation on minutes versus milligrams, I'm like, okay, that's an infusion, that's different.
That's why we do epi drips.
We don't do epi drips. It's not necessarily why we don't, we just incidentally do not. The reason why AEMTs don't do epi drips is because that is to affect all the tropic hormones in the heart, and we don't have time to teach you that in AEMT. Make sure that you understand how to calculate MAP. Do you know this? 1, 2, 3 for MAP? In short, let's do this.
I know the formula.
You know how to find MAP?
Yeah, I just might not learn it like that. Sounds similar.
Okay. Well, I'm a simple man. So if you're unfamiliar with MAP, now's the time. I'm going to assume you can all do MAP essentially with a calculator, but ultimately in your head. Right? 100 over 50. I take 50, I double it, I add it to 100, I divide the whole thing by 3. Okay? 1, 2, 3.
That's easier than others.
Well, I'm much smarter than him. Yeah, and stronger, and taller. Most of that's not true, but. Okay, now let's talk about, some of the fellows asked really good questions during the break. Did I make sure, did I expound on that to the class? There's some really good questions over there. Okay. How you doing, Gummy, all right? Did you remember to bring your lunch? Huh? Lactated ringers. The reason why we give lactated ringers is we don't. I have never seen it in the field, but it is in your scope. And what I want you to know is essentially that we'll give lactated ringers for large volume replacement. Large volume replacement. Like you're in the ICU for 14 days and you need fluid all the time, you're getting probably lactated ringers. The reason why I didn't see it in the field very often is because lactated ringers, unlike saline, contains a whole bunch of electrolytes. And so one of the most important facets of that is the fact that normal saline only has 2 electrolytes. Which electrolytes does normal saline have? Well, yep, it has sodium and chloride, right? This one's got a whole lot more. It's got calcium, it's got potassium, and those affect how your heart beats. So part of the reason why I'm not just like, boom, lactated ringers for everybody is because I'm now giving everyone potassium and calcium and not everybody needs that. Now, it's not great that if you're in the ICU for 14 days, me just constantly giving you sodium and Cl, chloride, giving you salt. You might need all these other things. Another thing that lactated ringers contains that isn't an electrolyte is lactate. Now, it's a little different than lactic acid. In fact, it's probably very different. Some chemist somewhere is furious right now. But lactate ultimately becomes a bicarb, which we use to buffer acids. So let me back up. Why would I give lactated ringers over normal saline? Large volume replacements. I'm not talking a liter. I'm talking days.
Do they prefer that?
There's nothing wrong. If he was bleeding and I gave him lactated ringers, there's nothing wrong with that. But it is traditionally used in burns where they're losing crazy amounts of fluids. It is traditionally used when they've been bleeding so much that their kidneys are starting to fail and stuff. So if you see this on the registry, it'll be like blah, 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 guy has a burn, blah, blah, and lactated ringers is on there. You're like, oh, burn people need a ton of fluid. Lactate would be the answer.
Does it have the same adverse effects as saline, or is it better because they're using a large volume replacement?
Suffice it to say that D5W, lactated ringers, and normal saline are all crystalloid solutions. They're all isotonic and asterisks, and mostly fall into the same category in almost every way other than just the contents of electrolytes and then the buffer of through lactate.
So, at one of the hospitals I was at,
Uh-huh.
I remember reading a sign talking about like, I don't remember what the sign was saying, but I talked to my medic about it. It was something about like when they do a big like blood transfer, I guess.
Okay.
A lot of the reasons, like something bad will happen because of that is because of the calcium, but they give this like along with like a big blood transfusion.
Definitely.
Do you kind of know what I'm talking about?
I think so, but your tone makes me wonder if I don't. But I'm like, yeah, I mean, lactated would be fine. Like, when you need large volume replacements, lactate's great because saline will make you acidic, and this will do that less so because it's administering lactate, which goes into your liver and then forms through. Man, I don't know that I want you to attach too much to the liver. I think I'd rather do it kidney. What's your intervention card say for lactated ringers? Yeah, well, I bet it doesn't say liver anymore. I think it's okay to know that. Like, here's the reason. Lactate that goes to your liver, then to your kidneys, if you're in liver failure, it does nothing. It's largely inert. But if you're in kidney failure, it can make it worse, which is why I care more that you know that it affects the kidneys. But we'll get into that. So, one second. Potassium is a strong, I don't want to say strong electrolyte, but it's an important electrolyte for your heartbeat. We'll talk in a moment here about the sodium-potassium pump, and it's about sodium and potassium exchanging across the wall and that generating the electricity, essentially. So giving somebody a bunch of potassium isn't always the best thing. It's why everybody, it doesn't just have lactated ringers. Well, it's got all kinds of stuff in there, and most people need crystalloid solutions for volume replacement, not electrolyte replacement. Also, it's probably more expensive. Hang on one sec for you. Go ahead, Tati.
So, for the lactate ringers, like, I understand that it's both major trauma and burns, but
Yep.
with it having lactate, that you said it can help someone in acidosis, would
Yeah.
it be considered if someone's having like a severe DKA or like HHS with them already having so much acid in the blood to possibly give them a lactated ringer to try to get that?
Yeah, admittedly, I don't think that it is their problem, in that the part of the issue that we'll talk about here when we go to into end-tidal and acid base is that breathing is very fast and effective at balancing your pH, but metabolically it is not. And so as much as you could be like, well, but if they're really acidic, shouldn't I just give that? I'm like, and shouldn't that help? And I'm like, yeah, it's just like a cup of water puts out a house fire. I'm like, water does work on fire, but that's not gonna be enough, really. So if I had a question that said something like, your patient is acidic, which should you give, A, normal saline, or B, lactated ringers? I'm picking lactated ringers all day. It's less acidic and it has a buffer in it for sure. So I don't think that's crazy at all. But it's also why it's not like, lactated ringers indication isn't acidosis. Because I'm like, well, because it's not doing a lot for that. Why not use electrolytes? I think we already, lactated ringers is kind of all we said. I gotta admit, I used to teach a much stronger case about like, ooh, lactated ringers, watch out for liver, watch out for kidney. And I'm like, I learned a little bit about it. It's not that you have to be like, oh no, liver. It's just that it's not helping, right? It's like if the liver can't do anything in the first place, then it's not gonna process the lactate, so it's no big deal. The major association here would be to know that essentially we have to be concerned with kidney failure because it can lead to excess potassium. So do we know who, I mean, probably this. I want to ask it by saying who might have chronically high levels of potassium? My man, good Lord. That's the second question that I wanted to ask is, okay, people who are on dialysis have high levels of potassium. Why is that? Why are you on dialysis in the first place? Kidney failure, right? And so if I've got a person that's on dialysis, I don't want to use lactated ringers for them because we already know that they're having kidney issues and the lactate that we're about to give them won't be being properly used and it's going to cause even more potassium increase, which is going to change the way our heart beats. But again, the biggest thing here, I think, is that you associate lactated ringers as large fluid volume, like in the case of major trauma, long stays at the hospital, or burns. And just remember that it contains a whole pile of other electrolytes that, if you don't need, are not going to help you. But the dose, like all the other crystalloids, are the same. Now, I don't include the 250 bolus on here. It's probably fine to do that as well. In fact, most scenarios you run here, if you're just like, I'm just going to run lactated ringers because I think this and that, it's not going to be the wrong answer most of the time, but there will be times where it's not appropriate. Our third crystalloid is D5W, and I want to make the point here that D5 and D5W are different things. The D in this case stands for dextrose. The 5, in fact, does mean 5% dextrose, just like D50 means 50%. The big difference there is the W. If I put dextrose in a saline solution, we call that D5. If I put it in water, we call it D5W, and it's a different thing. Why is it different? What is the difference here?
The tone acid.
Ooh, say it again. One is isotonic, right? Or at least I can say this emphatically. The tonicity is different, right? One has more solutes than the other.
Distilled water and sterile water. What's going on with distilled water? Like,
I don't know the
does it
difference.
have solutes in anything?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's why I'm a little insecure about saying tap water. I'm like, that might have solutes in it. It probably does, but I don't know. So it might be a very good Google question. Hey, distilled, sterile, and tap, what are the differences? I don't know, brother.
Okay.
In any case, none of them go in a vein, unless they're mixed with something else. D5W, if lactated ringers is a relatively rare, I think, topic in EMS, D5W is by far. In fact, I asked Mr. Dennert once, like, what do you teach the medics about D5W? And he was like, nothing really. And I was like, okay, that seems right. D5W, in short, it has sugar in it, so therefore if you need sugar, this might be the fluid they give, right? Like normal saline doesn't have any calories in it, it's got no sugar, so if you need sugar, well then we'll give you the D5W. There are some medications that do better or need to be diluted with D5W. It's not in our scope, and I have no idea what they are. I just know that there are some. Like there are some meds that can be given where they're like, you don't just give this straight, you mix it with D5W. And I can almost guarantee you it's because D5W shifts its tonicity. Can anybody think why D5W shifts tonicity?
It's going to draw the solids out of the blood, or out of the.
So because it's isotonic when we give it, there is no fluid movement. But because part of that is sugar, your body will use it in cellular metabolism and it will become hypotonic. Now, you don't need to remember that fun little science path we just took, but it's cool, I think. When I say there are some medications that need to be mixed with this, there are some medications that need to go intracellular, and so they'll mix it here with D5W so that way it pulls those meds in that way. I didn't know what they were as a medic, so we certainly don't need to either. So if I were to summarize, I'd say, hey, look, 80% of your knowledge of crystalloid solutions has to be revolving around normal saline. We need a little bit of knowledge on lactated for large volume, for burns, knowing that it has lactate that's going to affect the which organ primarily? Okay, we're okay. Kidney primarily. And that it has a bunch of other electrolytes, some of which is potassium and whatnot. D5W is probably always the wrong answer on a test. Again, like all other crystalloids, 20 mils for adults and kids, 10 for neos. I'll say this part here. I think the only thing we need to know in EMS about ions, about electrolytes, is that cations are positive and anions, onions, are bad, negative. Now, the only problem with this metaphor, other than the fact it takes a little bit of imagination, especially if you hate cats, is that all electrolytes are good for us in moderation. Too much is bad, too little is bad. So I don't mean to say that cations are good. I mean to say they're positively charged. And I don't mean to say that anions are onions. It works if you blur your eyes, maybe. It's just how I remember it. Do what you want. They're not bad, they're negatively charged. I'm pretty sure that's all you need to know about those. That cations are positive and anions are negative. That's it. Now, sodium, like a solute, and potassium, which is, I say like, but is a solute, they also can't cross the cell walls like gases, and like water. This is where cellular metabolism comes into play. How did glucose get across a cell wall? With insulin. No major process needs to occur. We emit insulin, express insulin. It goes to the cell wall, opens the door. This one is different. We have been talking about this since day one. Oxygen goes through, sugar gets transported through. They go on a very slow walk together, become entangled. They create ATP. ATP goes over to what's called the sodium-potassium pump, and sodium and potassium change places. Let me back up and give you bullet points to write down. Potassium, or K+, is that an anion or cation? That's right, because we love cats in here, right, Jack? Hell yeah, cations. No, what we do for the test. Potassium is a cation. We know that because it's positively charged, right? Which means sodium is what, an anion? It's also a cat. We love both of these. Absolutely, they're both positively charged. They won't cross the cell wall until ATP comes over here and affects the sodium-potassium pump, forcing them to, essentially. Here's the bullet point. Sodium is a cation, and it is primarily intracellular. That means essentially, in general, if I said, where is more of your potassium, in the cell or out of the cell, you would say in the cell. Intracellular. Which means sodium is extracellular, outside of the cell. Where does your heartbeat start? In the sinoatrial node. Why it's starting is because these are changing places. Because sodium and potassium went across the wall, a shock has occurred. That shock goes from this cell to your next cell, to your next cell, to your next cell, and that's a heartbeat, or at least the electrical depolarization. Where does your heartbeat start, Henry? Which node?
The
The SA node. Lauren, why is a electrical charge happening in your SA node? It is because what and what are switching places? I'll give you a hint. It's that. Sodium and potassium are going across the cell wall. It's depolarizing and starting the beat. And it can't do that without ATP. And we don't get ATP without oxygen, and we can't get sugar in there without insulin. And the water will be off balance if the sugar can't get in, because then it will rush out of the cell, and it's all kind of related to this cross-cellular wall diffusion processes. These things all kind of got to be in harmony to work out.
Are dysrhythmias common in people with diabetes, if that's the case?
Yes. Diabetes is one of the most treacherous diseases that is known to man. We just don't really think so because of how common it is, but it is profoundly destructive.
We need to know like depolarization.
Not yet. I've tried to keep a lot of that stuff out. What you need to know is essentially diffusion, active transport, the sodium potassium. If I said, hey, what's sodium potassium pump do? You're like, well, it's how sodium and potassium go across the cell wall. How does it do that? Well, with ATP. Where does that come from? Oxygen and sugar. That's what you need to know.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't want to spend a lot of time here either. There's nothing to help but memorization. It won't be a lot of questions on the speed of ingestion and the like, but here's the two things I want to say to help you through all this. Enteral, I remember as stuff you eat. Now that's somewhat misleading because you don't eat sublingual. But enteral is stuff that's going essentially in your GI tract in some way. Now, sublingual is debatable. It depends what source you read or Google. Since sublingual goes in your mouth, and that's part of the GI tract, our book includes it in the enteral, something you eat. Because it eventually goes out of your rectum, which hopefully has nothing to do with you eating, essentially is part of your GI tract, right? And then ingestion, of course, is the middle ground. So if I give you aspirin, is that a parenteral or enteral route? Enteral, because you're chewing it up and you're swallowing it, right? Nitro would also be enteral because it's going into your mouth, even though it's going into your blood. I say that to say that if you can remember these are the enteral, everything else is parenteral. Like IVs, IOs, all that stuff. So you don't have to memorize these so much as you have to know these, and then everything else is not that.
And then intramuscular is moderate.
Well, and that's kind of how I would go through it. I would just pick some of these and be like, hey, what's my fastest, what's my slowest, right? If you don't know conversions, let today be the last day you don't. But again, here's an easy thing for you to remember somewhat. We don't exchange a lot of these. I don't have any question, all right, sorry. We aren't going to have scenarios where you have to like draw up grams and take that down to milligrams. Not really. And in fact, we only have 1 microgram administration. So if you're picking microgram and you're not giving fentanyl, you're wrong in some way, either the wrong med or the wrong dose. Grams are with dextrose and technically oral glucose, but it messed up my scale. Technically oral glucose and the cyano kit. If you're picking grams or saying grams and it's not sugar or cyanide, you've picked the wrong one. Milligram, if you got to guess, you pick milligram. If you're in a scenario and you let out a tiny little squeak fart because you're so nervous and you don't remember what to say, guess milligram. That's what most of them are. Now, I'd rather you just know the dose, but if you had to guess, hedge it on milligrams. I always struggle with ketamine. I always want to call it micrograms. Make sure you know essentially that 2.2 pounds equals 1 kilogram. 2.2. I used to teach a much stronger message of, hey, you can take anybody's pounds, divide it by 2, and subtract 10%, like if you want to do it in your head. Like I've got a guy that's 180 pounds, I divide it by 2, it's 90, I subtract 10%, which is 9, and now he's 81, like that's his kilograms. We all got phones, we all got calculators, punch in 2.2. You can do it on the test, I want you to do it in the scenarios. We don't need a quick way, pull out your phone.
Yeah, it's literally
I get it.
2.2
Yeah.
and you get pounds to kilograms.
Absolutely. Divide it by 2.2. Then take a quick snap of you doing it. Bam. Get good math.
And the other way around, multiply.
That's correct. All right. Let's learn. What's up?
Did Sino Kit come in recently?
Yes. If you have cyanide poisoning, because like you were in a fire and you smelled a bunch of plastic, we would jab you with administer a Sino Kit through you IV, and it would bind with the cyanide so you could process it. Essentially, it's for cyanide poisoning. It's the Narcan of cyanide. And we have one. Fireman brought it in for us. Anyway, we're ready to talk about some formula methods and cross-multiplying with variables? Yeah, baby. Oh, yeah. I don't want to do that either. Now, when you go out into the world trying to figure out drug calculations, you're gonna find this, desired over have. Don't write too much here because I don't do that specifically. Desired over have. If you tell somebody Mr. Fearon's method, which is like D over S times V, they're gonna be like, the hell is that? And you're like, what's desired over have? And they're like, oh, okay. The reason I changed the letters is they're much easier for me to associate what I need you to input, okay? I'll walk you through it. This is the one I do want you to write down. Desired dose over solute times the volume. And I've got these color-coded for sure, on purpose, which means for the rest, well, for the majority of this presentation on the back end here, if something's pink, I'm trying to refer to desired dose, yellow for solute, and blue for volume. As a reminder, the solute is the solid. The solvent is the liquid. It's the solid. If I pour sugar and water, sugar is the solute, the water is a solvent.
I was confused because it was pointing to the pill.
Well, yeah, that is a solute. There's no solvent there.
Never mind. Okay. I'm just like,
What is your desired dose, meaning the dose you want to give to a patient's grocery hole? 324 milligrams. PO, right? Great. But what's the volume? 4 tablets will do, unless he's completely wrong. Could he ever be wrong?
No, absolutely.
Doesn't seem like him. He's right very often. What happens when you take not low-dose chewable aspirin and your dose suddenly becomes 1 tablet is 325?
The volume is just 1.
Now your volume is 1. Now, even though we never think about volume in something as simple as aspirin, because you don't need to, what I'm trying to frame is that it's almost like a silent letter that you've never been pronouncing. You've been secretly giving people volume all throughout your EMT career. We can see here on the bottle, essentially. I mean, you can't because it's tiny. But this says 36 tablets, 81 milligrams each. That means the solute is 81 milligrams. The volume is 1 tablet, which makes our concentration. You with me so far? Haley? Sam? All right, brother. Now, if I didn't have chewable baby aspirin, Sam, if I had an adult aspirin that said 324 per tablet, what would I put on the solute? Nope. 324 is the solute. That's the milligrams. The volume would be 1 tablet. John, I missed you. You have now successfully learned how to administer baby aspirin by volume. Congratulations. Somehow we made aspirin harder to think about. Now the truth is I don't need you to think about the volume of aspirin. I'm just trying to get a framework here for what I mean when I say that. This is Zofran, which I think Rose astutely said 4 milligrams and 2 milliliters. And she would be completely right. According to this bottle, you always have to check because there's a million type of concentrations in bottles, right? What's the solute in this Zofran? That is true, 2 milligrams per milliliter. And by reading this off, it'd be 4 milligrams in what's the volume? 2 milliliters. Which means, essentially, if I wanted to give a guy 4 milligrams, how many milliliters would I give? 2. If I wanted to give him 2 milligrams, which you shouldn't, what would I give? 1. Now that's easy math that we don't have, it's not even really math, right? That's how many quarters in a dollar. And you're like, 4. I'm like, ooh, did you count them up? No, that's memory. It's the same thing here. You're not doing math, but you can do math if you needed to. So here we have an unmixed medication. It's got the solute at the bottom, and if it were Zofran, it would be 4 milligrams of solute in 2 milliliters of water. But this is unmixed. You don't want to give this to somebody. It's the same reason why I'm not pushing aspirin into your veins. That would be way too much concentrate, right? A solution is what happens when you mix up a solute and a solvent and it stays mixed forever. What's a solution, Almeida?
When the solvent and solute stay mixed forever.
My girl. Glucagon is what they call a suspension. Glucagon is what happens when you put a solute and a solvent together and they will unmix.
What's that? We did like an experiment in high school, but like they like it's like oil and water. Like
Sure.
Like that, right? Is that what you're saying?
If by is it like that you mean they separate, then yes. It takes glucagon longer, but yeah. So glucagon is not a it is not a solvent. No, well, it's not that either, but it's not a, it's on the board. Solution. Glucagon is not a solution. Yes, it has a solute and a solvent, but it's a suspension. Why? Because it will unmix, which is why we keep it separately in the kit. Because if we just had it mixed like Zofran, you'd be giving them glucagon dust in a certain way. Now, let's say we got a 33-year-old male. What's our dosage for a 33-year-old male for Zofran? 4 milligrams. So what would our solute be? So milliliters is a form of volume, right? Now you already know this. If you did this math, essentially, you'd be saying, I don't have to do math. If he needs 4, I give him the whole darn thing. I'm like, I know you know that, but I'm trying to set up the framework because it's going to get more complicated. This is the formula. I want to give him 4 milligrams. The concentration is 4 milligrams in 2 milliliters. So I divide the desired dose, the dose I want to give him, by the dose that I have on hand, or as I call it, the solute, the medicine part, times the volume, which means, what answer am I coming up with here? 2 milliliters, which we knew that already, right? Now, like I said, many different things can come in be very careful here about, looking, this is fentanyl in the same concentration in every, well, no, that one's very different. Yeah, so there's different concentrations here and there's different quantities too. And so you have to be very careful about just saying, oh yeah, fentanyl's always given like this, or Zofran, I give the whole thing. I'm like, I've seen bottles of Zofran before that had like 80 milligrams in them. So make sure you're checking. Now what's the solute on fentanyl? Say it again? 100 what? Micrograms. What's the volume? 2 milliliters. Now, what's our dose for adults? Oh, I teach weight-based dosing for fentanyl, don't I? That's a pain in the butt. We know that it's 100 micrograms and 2 milliliters. It's just the solute in the volume, right?
When you say volume, is that the whole thing?
Yes. There's 2 milliliters in there. That's the volume. Now, what is the dose for fentanyl? 1 microgram per kilogram. How much is my desired dose for this man?
I'm going to use my calculator.
You have to use your calculator. Well, you don't have to, but you should. How are we getting there? We're taking 220, dividing it by, which comes to 100. So the desired dose is 100 over 100 times 2, which means we're giving how much? Well, do the math.
But how do you do milliliters times micrograms?
We would put 100 here, divide it by 100, which is what? 1. Multiply 1 times 2, which is? So we're administering the whole thing again, which is very convenient if we encounter a 220-pound patient. They won't always be that way. So let's do another here. Let me kind of cut to a quick. This is why this is a very common issue. It's why I spend so much time trying to break down solutes and solvents.
Sorry, I'm just.
No, I assure you, it is one of the biggest hang-ups. I'm trying to find my pool, but I'm gonna have to back out because I don't know where my pool is. I take 25 grams of dextrose, D50, and I put it in a shot glass full of water. I then take 25 grams of dextrose and I put it in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Which one tastes better? Shot glass. Which one has more sugar in it? They have the same amount. I put 25 grams in each, but what's changed is the concentration, right? Dextrose has 25 grams, D50 has 25 grams of sugar in it. That's the solute. The solvent is changing dramatically here. So if I said, this is a shot glass and that's an Olympic pool, right? And I said, I want to administer by mouth, PO, 25 grams of dextrose, how much of the shot glass do I give? The whole thing, because the whole thing contains 25 grams. How much if I had to give 25 grams of the Olympic-sized pool would I have to give? The whole thing. It's the same solute, but the volume is changing dramatically. Okay? Now let's assume this is, I'm gonna have to make some numbers up here, but let's say that this is 60 milliliters, this shot glass. If I wanna give a guy half of the dose of dextrose, 12.5 grams, and that's a 60, let's just say 100 milliliter glass, how much dextrose am I giving? 12.5 grams. But how do I get that into him? How do I know what 12.5 grams is? You draw it up, but you're not drawing up solute, you're drawing up a solution, which makes it a milliliter concoction. 50 milliliters. What you didn't say is I drew up 12.5 grams. I mean, that would be true, but the syringe is measuring milliliters. Aspirin's easy. It's not ground up and put in a solution where I inject it. I just give you 4 of them. Okay, what happens when I'm trying to give you 25 and it is mixed up in a solution? Now I need to not only find out how many milligrams or grams I want to give, I also have to know how many grams per milliliter because I'm administering the milliliters, I'm not administering the grams. Right? Which means if I said, hey, this Olympic-sized pool has 25 grams of dextrose in it, how much dextrose do you want to draw up and put in somebody's vein, if it wouldn't kill them, if they needed 20 grams of dextrose?
4/5 of the pool.
You bastard. The idea is you have to ask me questions of volume now. Right? You have to say, well, it depends. How many milliliters are in there? Because that's what I have to do. 80%. 4/5. Yeah. It's good answers. The point is the same thing with these meds. You know, when I'm talking about administering these meds, the question needs to become, okay, so I know I'm giving this guy 100 micrograms, but how many milliliters? Because I need to figure out how many micrograms are in each milliliter. Right? Do this one. 165. I wish, I'm going to find a syringe and I'll show you exactly what I mean.
So like in general, give them milliliters, right?
Okay, let's say there are 25 grams of sugar in here, okay? I want you to give me 10 of those grams in my vein.
So there's 25 grams.
And the dose is 10 grams. How can you give it to me? Don't look at the thing because that's just a syringe.
I don't know.
What do you have to know to be able to give me? The volume, because how could you just give me 10 grams? It's a solution, it's all mixed in. The question needs to be, well, I know I can draw up milliliters. How many grams per milliliter is this?
That's why you use volumes.
Yeah, because if you're just giving it to me PO or whatever, I mean, if it were pills, no big deal. But you're giving it intravenous, which means it's in a volume, which means you have to figure out how many grams per milliliter it is. Does that make sense?
Yes, I was confused at first.
It's a very common confusion.
Thank you.
So, what is the solute here? 100 micrograms. What is the volume? 2 milliliters. How do you know that? It says so on the bottle. What is the step before the desired dose here? Figuring out the weight.
Oh, okay.
Because we don't administer it based on pounds, we administer it based on kilograms. Graham, how many kilograms is that? 75. So what are we putting here? 75? No, you have to do the next step, which is how many micrograms per kilogram, which is 1. So we are putting 75 there.
You gotta give a half dose. You gotta give a half dose because he's over 65.
Oh, which is why I made it that way. So we ordinarily would put 75 for an adult not geriatric. Since this guy is geriatric, we cut it in half, which means we're putting, what does that work to, 37.5? 37.5, what are we dividing it by? 100, which equals? Sure, well, it's 0.375, is that what it is? Yeah, 0.375, so that means essentially with the decimal would go twice, 37.5. Here's the issue you're having. You're saying, oh, okay, so I need to give 37.5 micrograms of fentanyl. And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. It's a liquid though. So then you have to do the next step of multiplying it by the volume to figure out how much meds to draw up. Let's work back to what we already know. You want to give Zofran how many milligrams? How many milligrams do you draw up? Well, we don't draw up milligrams. We're going to have to draw up a volume, which is 2. And we know that because it's 4 and 2. Remember what I said about how you're like, huh? Yeah. Till the computer dies. Make sure you know hand heavy, but I don't want to spend my time on hand heavy right now. But you have to know this. You have to. Where I want to spend our remaining 15 minutes is teaching you about concentration of dextrose. Is that me, Alanis? Okay. Maybe let's just do one more. Let's just do one more. You have a 1-year-old. I want you to do this on your own, everybody. Write down the solute, which I have acetaminophen, 160 milligrams per 5 milliliters. 160 milligrams per 5 milliliters. You wishing you stayed in EMT? Heck no.
So would it be 1 divided by 2.2?
You got drug cards? Say it again. 10 kilograms. I want to encourage you, if you think there's any way to get talented, fast, or good at this that isn't just generating a million of these, you're wrong. The only way to do this, or to get decent at this and not take forever, is to do it over and over and over. And believe it or not, it's simple. Sam, what's going right here? 160, well done. Tati, what's going on my volume? 5 milliliters, well done. Any questions so far? Now my patient is 1 year old. How much do they weigh? 10 kilograms. You got a question, Henry?
Oh, I got the answer.
Oh, my man. Now, I've got a desired dose here. What is my dose of Tylenol? 15 milligrams per kilogram. So that's what I put there, right? 15 milligrams? No, I have to convert it because we do it per kilogram, which means I'm putting what there? 15 times 10, which is? So I divide 150 by 160, which I definitely can't do in my head. And I multiply that by 5. Henry, what'd you get? 4. Okay. And so what we're looking at essentially is that if I can prove to you how, like, it's still somewhat obvious. Like, if I've got a 1-year-old who weighs 10 kilograms and I'm giving 15 milligrams per kilogram, I'm giving him 150 milligrams. That's almost 160. I was pretty sure I was going to give him about 5 anyways, so the math works out fine. Probably, but that's a topic for another day. Long story short, if they're over 8, I give them, here's how I think about it. You ready? I think about it like aspirin. If you're over the age of 8 years old, I give you 324 Tylenol. If you're under the age of 8, I give you half of that.
You mean 324 aspirin?
No, I'm talking Tylenol doses. That's how I did it my whole career. It's not that big of a deal either way, but it will have to be exact on a test. Now we want to give D50. What's your desired dose for D50 for an adult? 25 grams, right? If only. Sadly, there is only one. 25 grams, which if we had to do the math on this, I mean, we wouldn't, because we know it's 25 grams and 50 milliliters. We just give the whole amp, they'd call it. But what would go in the solute? That would be half the dose. Is that what Dennert teaches for adults? I think that's good. This is 25 grams and 50 milliliters. What goes on the solute? What was acetaminophen? Acetaminophen was 160 in 5. This one is 25 grams in 50. I'm not sure why you're dividing anything by half. Okay, acetaminophen is 160 milligrams in 5 milliliters. Dextrose is 25 grams in 50 milliliters. 25 grams is the solute, 50 milliliters is the volume. You could do it 0.5 over, you could take it to its lowest common denominator. Here's the tough part. I'd rather you not give D50. You can. It's not crazy. I did it most of my career, well, a lot of my career, but it's very, very hypertonic. If I give you something very hypertonic, it leaves you very prone to fluid shift and cellular destruction. I would much rather you and would strongly encourage you to give D10. If you give D50 appropriately on a practical, you're not going to be scored down, but D10 is definitely better. It is much less harsh for people, and it is where our whole career is moving to. So now the question, not only, this is what happens if you get extravasation of D50, essentially it necrotizes, it destroys your cells if you get it outside of the veins. Thankfully, we don't need to do desired over half or my solute volume solution for dextrose, but what we do have to do is develop the concentration, because in most cases we are given D50 and have to make D10. You're given an amp or a syringe of D50 and a bag of saline, and you have to inject enough in there to not dissolve, not deconcentrate, but diffuses. We're in the same wheelhouse. Yeah, to lessen the amount of dilute. My man, thank you so much. Okay, so let's talk about this here essentially. Kilograms times 5 milliliters. Well, do I even want to do that? Okay. We know that our volume dose is 5 milliliters per kilogram, right? Which means that if I had a 136-pound patient, divided that by 2.2, and then multiplied that by 5, that's my dose. I give 310 milliliters, right?
So you add that to the D50 bag.
I'll talk about mixing it here in a second. This is assuming I just handed you a bag of D10. I hand you a bag of D10. How much do you give the patient? Well, you can do it one of two ways. You can figure out the grams, 0.5, or you can figure out the milliliters as far as what you're infusing. The problem is if you tell a nurse, like, hey, I gave 310 milliliters of D10, she's going to look at you like you're crazy. She's going to be like, right, how much dextrose did you give? Because she wants the solute. She wants the medication amount. She has no idea what 310 milliliters of dextrose D10 is. You ready to learn calculations about how to develop different concentrations of dextrose? This is interesting because there are a bunch of different ways to do it, okay? And to cut to the quick, I will tell you this. If you remember only 2 things about making D10, remember this one first. 250 saline. If you drain out 50, leaving you with how much? If you then put in the same amount of D50, that will create a bag of D10. Jack, you got a bag of 250, you want to make D10. How much do you drain out of the bag? My man. Alanis, how much D50 do you want to put into the bag? 50. You put back in what you drew out. That turns your D50 from, turns your 250 bag saline into 250 milliliters of D10. If you remember nothing else, remember that. 50 out, 50 in, D10.
But what if you have to do the weight-based thing?
And you will.
No, but like, what if it's more than
Jack? Because you're draining out. I will say, you can probably push the whole thing in there. It'll look really funny, but you could probably do it. Kendall, I'm about to give D10. I throw you a 250 bag of saline. How do you make it D10? 50 of what? Uh-huh. Good. No, not D10. I'm trying to make D10. D50. How we doing? Any questions? Aiden, how you doing?
I'm doing terrible.
If you remember nothing else, remember you can make a 250 bag by draining out 50 and adding a whole amp of D50 and you're good. Where that comes into a problem is a volume issue. If you get neonates, you're now making it in the D50 syringe. To make D50 for an adult and peds, you're draining 50 out of a saline bag of 250, putting in a whole amp of D50, you got a whole bag of D10. But if you got a little tiny person, you won't be running a whole bag of D10, 250 milliliters. That's like their entire circulating blood volume. So what you will do then is pour out 40 milliliters of that dextrose and draw up 10 milliliters of saline. And that whole thing becomes, or no, not 40, 40 milliliters. I wrote it wrong here. You would have 10 remaining. You would push out 40 of dextrose, draw up 40 of normal saline. That one should be a 4.
So okay, well, D50.
You're like, I thought I got it, but that's crazy.
Yeah, it's like 50% dextrose.
If you have 50 milliliters,
25,
yes, sir.
which is 10% of 250.
Yes, that's
Which
correct.
makes it D10.
Yes, sir.